Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, if you do enjoy the video that you came here to watch, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that little red subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. It really does help my audience grow. It really does help this channel grow. It means more than you realize. So go ahead, hit that little red button. Also, remember, full episodes of the Aaron Torres Podcast, wherever you download your podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. Now, here is the video that you came here for.
So with that said, let's not waste any more time and get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, I'll say this. Listen, we talk college football coaching carousel, to a smaller degree, college basketball as well. But we talk college football coaching carousel a ton this time of year, September into October. And then it really ramps up in November. And I'll say this. We call it the coaching. We call it the silly season, okay, because it's silly. You don't know what to believe, what not to, reports, rumors, innuendo, message boards, etc. But what I would say is if silly season is really from when the first coach gets fired till the last one gets hired, these next 2 weeks, I believe, are about to be as silly and as crazy as any throughout the rest of the entire calendar year. The question would be, why is that? Well, it's pretty straightforward. One, the regular season, believe it or not, is coming to an end, okay? Regular season is coming to an end. The last set of games is not this coming Saturday, but the following one. And that is when we have historically seen all of the craziness, especially now that coaches are getting fired earlier in the year. What you see is usually it's that Sunday or the Monday following the regular season that all of the craziness happens, for the simple reason that all of these schools that have been open for a couple weeks or a couple months, whether it's Auburn, whether it's Nebraska, whether it's Georgia Tech, Arizona State, whoever, they've had time to do all their research. They've had time to do all their homework. Now that the regular season is over, it's go time. It's full speed ahead. But I would add this, because of the way the recruiting calendar has changed, it makes it that much more imperative that you get your guy in place ASAP. We talk about the December, early to mid-December signing day for high school recruits. That is really important, but keep in mind as well, there is a new variable. Remember, we have closed the transfer portal. Players are not allowed to enter the transfer portal during the season now. They are allowed to enter, though, the Monday or Sunday, I forget which day it is, but after the conference championship games. So in other words, you want to get your head coach in place ASAP as soon as the regular season ends. So when those portal doors come swinging open, and you just saw my hands if you're watching on YouTube, your coach can run full speed ahead and attack the portal, to quote Jim Harbaugh, with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. And so really, again, that Monday and that Sunday after the season, you got to be moving. It was last year on the Sunday after the regular season that Lincoln Riley got hired at USC. It was the Monday after that Brian Kelly got hired at LSU. Both of those guys get in, close recruiting classes, have success in the portal, and you see the impact now and how quickly a coach can turn things around. So that's all a precursor. That all explains. It has nothing to do with what is really the topic of the day, though, which is that over the last 24 hours, there is a lot of Auburn and Lane Kiffin buzz picking up steam. We've talked a little bit about it. I want to take a deep dive into what we know, what we don't know, why it could be realistic, why it could not be here in the coming minutes. But what I would say is this. This is beyond just, I don't really dabble in the internet message board world, even though it's really fun to hang out in. It's fun to hang out in. But as a sort of credible media member, I don't try to dabble in it too much. This isn't just message board rumor. This is credible reporters from credible outlets that cover Auburn with some really interesting information starting Sunday night into Monday and now into Tuesday. So first of all, what are the reports that are out there? First of all, it's important to note with Auburn, they finally do have an AD in place. Remember, their AD, Allen Green, got kind of pushed out the door. He kind of quit, but he didn't really quit. He was kind of forced out in the summertime. And it took until about 2 weeks ago. But Auburn did officially get their AD in place. John Cohen came from Mississippi State, and he's moving full speed ahead. He's moving 1,000 miles an hour. And the reports are that he has targeted Lane Kiffin as his number one candidate. Now, Lane Kiffin probably isn't talking to him, but Lane Kiffin's agent, Jimmy Sexton, is probably talking to him. And both sides are kind of feeling each other out. Okay, does this make sense for Auburn? Does Auburn make sense for Lane? What can Auburn provide that Ole Miss can't? And we're going to get to that in a minute. But obviously, one, there are reports that Lane Kiffin is the top target. And two, it is that they are willing to pay top dollar to get him. Now, he might not get that Brian Kelly 10-year, $100-ish million contract. He might not get that Jimbo Fisher 10-year fully guaranteed contract, but the reports are minimum of 7, maybe 8 years as a contract with a huge base salary of whatever it would be, $7-8 million per year. And so you can see why Auburn would be interesting to Lane Kiffin. Now, in terms of why would Auburn be interested in Lane Kiffin, I think it goes without saying, right? I don't think you need me to fully explain it. I know he's a little bit goofy. I know he's a little bit different. He does some weird stuff on social media, but the guy has come to the SEC and taken the SEC by storm. Last year, I don't think a lot of people know this, was the first time ever that Ole Miss won 10 games in a regular season in the history of their program. They won 9 multiple times, but they never won 10. And here's the crazy part. They could go back-to-back with 10-win seasons under Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Never been done before. It could be done this year. They're currently sitting at 8-2 overall. Only losses at LSU, Bama, and home. They're favored this week against Arkansas. They will be favored next week at home in the Egg Bowl. So Lane Kiffin, for all his goofiness, has turned into an elite college football coach. And I think we have to start giving him credit. And I think one of the reasons that he's so appealing to Auburn is you look at the roster that he had this year, or I should really say the roster he had coming out of last year. I don't think people realize how much he lost. And so for him to rebuild this thing largely through the transfer portal, Jackson Dart at quarterback, Zach Evans, the kid Watkins at wide receiver, Michael Trigg, the tight end, the way he rebuilt this thing through the portal, you shouldn't be able to rebuild at a place like Ole Miss after the season they had last year. But he did it in large part because of the portal. And so you see he's having success on the field. He's kind of figured out this new wave of recruiting. And so the reasons that Auburn would want him are very obvious. Wins at a high level, fun offense, puts up points, can turn over a roster quickly, which for Auburn is important. Recruits his butt off. Obviously, the big story of the last few weeks, the Judkins kid that is dominating for Ole Miss as a true freshman running back. Was from the Auburn area, wanted to go to Auburn. So you see why Lane Kiffin is appealing. Now, what I do want to talk about, I think some people would probably sit there and say, and some people have asked me point blank, well, what's so appealing about Auburn? And not that Auburn's a bad job, not that Auburn's a terrible job, but is it really that much better than Ole Miss? Is it worth uprooting your whole life to go there? And so what I would say to that, I think there's 2 ways to look at it. There's the why he should stay at Ole Miss over Auburn, why he should go to Auburn over Ole Miss. The reasons to stay at Ole Miss are pretty straightforward. He's got a great thing going. I just told you, 10 wins last year, 10 wins potentially on the table this year. The only 2 teams that he's lost to this year are both in the top 10 legitimate programs, destroying everybody, got a good thing going, and a couple other variables. One, it seems as though the folks in Oxford love him. Willing to kind of, he's different. He's a little goofy, but they love him for it. They let him be him. My understanding is they don't overly kind of get their hands too in the dirt with what he's doing. They kind of let him run the football program the way that he wants. And he's also making $7 million a year. So you can see why Lane Kiffin would just say, dude, I don't care how much money Auburn offers me. I don't care how many years are on the contract. I am just going to stay here. But I do think, and we've talked about this before, there are some compelling reasons as to why Lane Kiffin would want to go to Auburn that I do think we need to discuss, and we need to be fair to the Auburn folks that are listening. One, it is a better job. Like, it's just a better job. You can't debate it. You can't argue it. In the last, 13 years, Auburn has won a national title. Auburn has played for a national title. They've done it under 2 different head coaches. I've talked about this a lot, but what is it? The last, 4 head coaches have all won the SEC West. I believe the last 5 head coaches have all won, the last guy, Pat Dye, won an SEC, even though there were no divisions at the time. But then Tommy Bowden, then Tommy Tuberville, then Gene Chizik, then Gus Malzahn, all had won a share of the SEC, an SEC West title, played for an SEC title, or in Tommy Bowden's case, had an undefeated season. So it's a better job. You can win at a higher level, and there's some other variables as well. First off, I don't know how many of you know this. Now, diehard Auburn and diehard Ole Miss fans know this because it's been a topic of conversation of late. And this could be the driving factor for Lane Kiffin to go from Ole Miss to Auburn. There is this weird quirk in Mississippi where apparently state employees can't have more than a 4-year contract. So they could offer Lane Kiffin $20 million a year at Ole Miss, but they can't offer him more than 4 years on that contract. And so again, first of all, they're not going to offer him $20 million, but beyond that, that could be a driving force in why he goes. 4 years at even $8-9 million a year is a great way to live for virtually everybody. But if you can get double that, if you can get 8 years at $10 million, if you can get an $80 million guaranteed contract over 10 years, that's hard to turn down. Fully guaranteed 10-year contract. Not saying Auburn is willing to go there, but even an 8-year fully guaranteed contract over a 4-year contract, you probably have to take it if you want to set up your kids for the rest of their lives. And then finally, and I think this stuff is important, we've talked about it, the Auburn NIL stuff is real. Listen, we live in a post-NIL world. You can fight the NIL stuff. You can hide from it. You can pretend like it doesn't exist, or you can accept that it's a reality. And I do think that Auburn is as well positioned as anybody in college football in the NIL space. We talked about it when John Cohen was hired as AD. John Cohen left Mississippi State because he just said the Auburn NIL is so much better set up to win at a higher level than Mississippi State. I'd be foolish not to go. And it's kind of the same with Lane Kiffin. The reports are they already have $13 million committed to their NIL fund. I'm sure they could get more if they need it. And so again, whether you want to admit it or not, whether you want to accept it or not, this is the world that we live in. And as NIL gets bigger and bigger and bigger, Auburn is going to be in position to have success at the highest level in the NIL space. And there's also the other factor of, fan support in general. Keep in mind, Lane Kiffin a few times has complained that, Ole Miss fans aren't in the stadium at kickoff. So there's a lot of variables. So it's an interesting dynamic. We don't have answers, but what is clear from reports, it is clear that Auburn's top target is Lane Kiffin for good reason. And now it just comes down to, does he want it? Does he not? And does he deem Auburn to be a place that he can win it at a higher level than Ole Miss? It'll be interesting to follow. There's obviously a few other factors, one of which it's been widely reported that a lot of people in the other part of the state of Alabama, Tuscaloosa, want Lane Kiffin to replace Nick Saban at some point in the future. So that is something else to consider. But I just bring it up because, listen, right now, nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to happen publicly. Lane Kiffin is going to coach these last 2 games. But they play Arkansas this week. Then they play the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving Day. And so you talk about how quickly, in theory, Lane Kiffin, who has now been eliminated from the SEC championship game, they're not going to Atlanta. His regular season ends next Thursday on Thanksgiving Day, about 10 days or 8 days from as you listen. It could happen quick. Be ready. Be careful. Because I am just telling you, this is picking up steam on social media and picking up steam with reporters who cover Auburn.